Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into something really fascinating and, honestly, deeply personal. We're mapping out an incredibly complex intersection of cutting-edge tech, personal sovereignty, and the mechanics of family law, all straight from our source material. We're going to follow the journey of an innovator whose massive technological breakthroughs basically kicked off a cascade of personal and systemic battles. We're starting off powerfully here with an incredibly raw assertion from tech innovator Kyle McLean-Smith. In the source material, he describes feeling totally backed into a corner, forced into an aggressively defensive posture over his life and his work. He literally likens his situation to a John Wick kind of experience. You know, that drastic, completely unwanted shift from just being a creator to a guy fighting for absolute survival after losing the things he values most. All right, let's quickly hit our roadmap for today. We are going to cover 1, the weight of innovation, 2, family as a control mechanism, 3, systemic issues in divorce, and finally, 4, pathways to societal healing. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The weight of innovation, the high-stakes tech fueling the conflict. To really grasp the personal fallout here, we first got to understand the immense value of the technology we're actually talking about.
So Kyle asserts that his core contribution is the creation of fully deterministic computer systems. Now, why does this matter? Well, traditional computer processors often use what are called floating point units. These rely on mathematical approximations, basically guessing, so they can function really fast. Kyle's tech completely bypasses that. It offers absolute forensic accuracy with zero guessing, and he claims this solves a fundamental flaw in global financial ledgers. He pulled this off by applying deep, fundamental geometric and mathematical truths directly into computer architecture. We're talking about extending the Fibonacci sequence, Pythagorean theorems, applying the metallic mean family. He views this absolute mathematical certainty as literally the only way to build a truly secure financial ledger. And because of that absolute security, he argues his tech became totally indispensable to powerful geopolitical entities. But here's the catch, and it perfectly illustrates the heavy burden of this kind of discovery. The sources outline a classic black swan pattern. Because his mathematical discoveries were so exceptional, so completely paradigm-shifting, Kyle argues he wasn't just viewed as a pioneer anymore. He became an invaluable and therefore highly vulnerable asset. This immense external pressure, that's exactly what sets the stage for the intense personal crisis that follows. Which brings us to Section 2, family as a control mechanism. The personal cost of value. Let's look at how this intense technological value translates into deeply personal fallout and the alleged weaponization of his own family. Are innovators controlled through their families? This stark question really hits the nail on the head when it comes to Kyle's primary concern. The source material highlights his deep suspicion that his own technological contributions inadvertently turned his family into a geopolitical leverage point. He explicitly questions whether his family is actively being weaponized as a control mechanism by outside forces. Forces that ultimately want to dictate the future of those deterministic computing ledgers we just talked about. Now, communicating this level of distress is incredibly difficult. As noted by his colleague in the sources, Kyle's raw, authentic expression of human pain completely clashes with a world that's used to tailored, highly managed messaging. Think about it. Manipulative systems thrive on cold, sterile optics, right? But Kyle's cries for help are chaotic, they're loud, and they're totally unfiltered. And the sources suggest this dynamic leads to him being deeply misunderstood, or even actively marginalized by the people around him. The sheer scale of the personal loss he reports is just staggering. He describes his profound alienation from his family and genuine existential fear for his wife's safety, stating point blank, "I don't know if Emily is still alive." He views himself as a political refugee within his own life, claiming that his deeply bonded marriage was systematically dismantled by external pressures trying to seize control of his intellectual property. Moving on to Section 3, Systemic Issues in Divorce, a critique of the legal ecosystem. What's absolutely fascinating here is how the source material takes this intensely personal devastation and expands it into a massive macro-level critique of our current legal systems. The source material unpacks a series of major systemic grievances. It argues that modern family law and property rights frameworks, specifically calling out the erosion of basic Canadian property rights, are fundamentally structurally imbalanced. From his perspective, the legal system isn't about justice. It's practically weaponized to facilitate asset liquidation and systemic coercion. It's tearing families apart specifically to extract the intellectual and financial wealth of the people involved. And the material doesn't pull punches here. It explicitly targets what it sees as a deep-seated misandry and family law, arguing that a systemic lack of men's rights in divorce proceedings is a fundamental societal failure. From this specific viewpoint, the system functions as a mechanism for pure destruction. It turns a blind eye to real human pain, enabling the exact kind of leverage and control Kyle claims to be surviving right now. He describes our current legal environment as a house of mirrors, which is a wild but incredibly vivid way to think about how easily personality-driven, fast-moving systems can just break down. He argues that society is currently relying on highly precarious, chaotic, and completely subjective legal rulings. We're using a house of mirrors instead of objective, verifiable mechanics. And that subjectivity, it allows bad actors to exploit innovators and their families with absolutely zero accountability. That takes us to our final section, Section 4. Pathways to societal healing, frameworks for reconciliation. Because despite mapping out this really grim picture of systemic failure and tragedy, the source material actually offers some very concrete, constructive frameworks for how we might resolve this. Instead of standard models, Kyle strongly advocates for witness and reconciliation commissions. He makes the case that society's default setting is simply to avoid looking at deep human pain. So, to fix the systemic injustices of family law and corporate coercion, he proposes a completely new approach, a system that forces institutions to actively witness and genuinely process the trauma they inflict on individuals. It's about moving past avoidance and toward actual, genuine healing. There is such a severe contrast between our current societal ecosystem and this proposed transcendent society. We'd be moving from an environment completely defined by avoidance, that subjective house of mirrors legal system and the literal liquidation of families, toward a society that's built on the actual acknowledgement of pain, truly objective deterministic rules, much like his computer architecture, and real reconciliation. And the proposed method to actually get there breaks down into a few specific steps. Step 1, we have to acknowledge and bear witness to the raw pain of the individual. Stop the avoidance. Step 2, once that's acknowledged, establish a restorative healing circle right around that pain. And finally, step 3, implement objective legal frameworks. We absolutely have to make sure these systemic abuses simply cannot happen to the next generation of innovators. Interestingly enough, Kyle frames this entire pursuit of objective, neutral justice as what he calls fifth-wave feminism. Now, within the context of the source material, this isn't what you might immediately think of. It's described as a highly practical, mathematical approach to safeguarding human dignity across the board. The ultimate goal is a legal and social framework that functions with the reliable, absolute neutrality of a math equation, protecting all parties equally. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought based on the sources we've explored today. As we continue to demand more and more paradigm-shifting technological advancements, how do we ensure our legal and family systems actually protect, rather than weaponize, the fundamental human rights of the creators themselves? It's a huge question. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and I definitely encourage you to keep questioning those structures that try to balance innovation and humanity.